Hey everybody, it's Tyler Esselman.
And it's Michael Osinski.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11.
This One Goes to 11, the podcast where we invite someone to share a perfect album with us.
So perfect, in fact, Michael, that 10 out of 10 just isn't good enough.
Sure ain't.
Michael, you are a fine cook. I know this about you.
I'm all right.
Yeah, you make a mean lentil soup. I often think about the lentil soup that you made for me and Noah Loffer and Jared Hecht in our basement apartment in Chicago one time when you were crashing with us. Do you have like a recipe that you are obsessed with right now that you just like are making constantly? Or do you have a recipe that you make every week?
Oh, I have recipes to make every week. Like my husband and I have been talking about how like we every week because we're making the same things over and over again. Because like I like to experiment. I got this cookbook that's like all vegan Asian cuisine, or not, I might just be vegetarian. I'm not sure. And like towards the beginning of the semester, I tried out one of those recipes, and it was fine. But like when you try out a new recipe, there's just so much. It takes like twice as long as it will eventually take.
Of course,
when you start making it regularly, and we just don't have that kind of time. So I would say there's like 3 or 4 things that I just make every week that are just, I mean, like they're tasty and they get the job done, and it's like I can make them.
What is one of
thinking
them?
About them? One of them is something I've been making for like over 20 years at this point, which is just like a real simple like black beans and rice with if I can get like a chorizo or something to go with it. Like it's real boring and basic, but like you get some lime Tostitos to go with it.
Stuff's underrated though. We have to have our boring dishes because I'll give you one of mine. You do black beans. Mm-hmm. You do a bed of black beans. You can kind of like warm them up, kind of do a little seasonings on them if you want to. Black beans, then roasted sweet potatoes, spinach. Avocado of some kind. You could do like a guacamole or whatever you want to do. And then spicy brown mustard. You wrap that in a tortilla. And I'm telling you, my friend, it is a good dish. It's a really, it's a staple for me right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I recommend people make it. And you know what else? You know who's such a dish, such a lovely, such a scrumptious dish of a man.
Nice segue. Here we go.
Is our guest this week. Michael, who are we speaking to on this week's episode?
We are talking to Aldo Melo, a Miami native who established his roots in the Bay Area, working as a massage therapist and yoga instructor, a thinker and a feeler, a creative and a healer, ultimately an observer of all things considered human behavior, and the brother to season 2 guest Nitza Melo. When she talked to us about 9 Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral. It's Aldo, who I've actually only met in person once, and it was many years ago, and we talk about it in the episode, so I won't want to say too much about it. But yeah, it was good to have another conversation with him.
Yeah. And oddly, reconnecting with that person, and I was reconnecting with this album. Had not touched this album in a long time, but it was a great one to speak about this week. I think y'all enjoy this.
Yeah, let's just let him hear it, shall we?
Let's shall.
Without further ado, Aldo Melo, welcome to This One Goes to 11. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. This is a legacy episode, huh?
It is. It's all in the family here at This One Goes to 11, and you are continuing that trend.
Is this the first legacy episode, or has there been more family connections?
Technically, my father has been on, which but we haven't had the sibling connection yet.
But we did have Sam Lopez and her mother.
Yes.
Oh, we've had that. So there's some legacies being established, and I'm sure we will continue the tradition.
Well, we're really excited about the album. We're excited about every album that comes to the tribunal, but I feel like this is right in Michael's and I's sweet spot in terms of like the intersection of our knowledge of music. Michael, I haven't expressed that thought to you yet, but I'm gratified by this particular artist coming before us today. So Aldo, thank you for that. Let's not tease it anymore. Aldo, can you tell us, what album hath thou brought before This One Goes to 11 tribunal today?
What I presented for is it sacrifice? No, maybe not the right word.
Could be.
But what I presented to the tribunal is Weezer's Pinkerton.
Yes.
Well, but before we dive too much into the album and what you have to say, and you make your case for this, Aldo, we have a segment we like to start out with, in case there are listeners out there who are unfamiliar with Weezer and Pinkerton. And what is that called, Tyler? What might that be called?
Oh, that segment is that's everyone's favorite. That segment is called The Beginner's Guide to Weezer's Pinkerton in 60 seconds, and yours truly will be taking up the task today. I feel good about this one, actually.
Okay. Although you get to evaluate his case using whatever rubric or scale you choose. I will keep the clock, but you get to keep the integrity. Yes, we're gonna say the integrity of Weezer and Weezer's Pinkerton.
You're the keeper. You're our resident expert, though. So don't pull any punches. I want you to put me through my paces. Okay.
Okay. I mean, I hope I live up to the expectation.
You will. Don't worry. I'm ready, Michael.
Okay, I got a minute on the clock.
Yep.
We're going in 3, 2, 1, go.
If you want to know about Weezer, come with me as I walk this way. This merry band of bespectacled Chuck Taylor-shod alt boys trace their origin to the hotbed of rock that might be considered alternative that was Los Angeles in the 90s. Most of you will be familiar with their iconic yet divisive frontman Rivers Cuomo, but let's not forget drummer Patrick Wilson and bassist Matt Sharp, who along with the guitarist Brian Bell released their Blue album in May 1994, produced by none other than the Cars' Rick Ocasek. That shit is certified triple platinum, my guys, and established the guitar-centric, maddeningly catchy power pop sound that Weezer has traded in so prolifically for the last 30 years. Their follow-up was spawned from Cuomo's experience landing at Harvard as a student shortly after their rapturous success of their debut. His efforts to develop a sci-fi space opera called Songs from the Black Hole found no creative purchase, and a dark mental state provoked by an intense leg surgery and a frustrating sense of isolation led to Pinkerton. It takes its name from a character in the infamous... Oh, shit! Damn!
Well, keep going. Okay. Finish it out.
Basically, the last part of that is it takes its name from a character in Madama Butterfly, which is just crazy. And a whole thing that we need to talk about in itself. And it was initially quite poorly received, but I think a lot of people consider it their magnum opus now. So I paraphrased the last bit, but that's the summary I got for you, Aldo. Thank you. Clearly, I did not hit our time mark, which, rules schmools, as I like to say, as I just said for the first time ever in my life. But it's up to you, Aldo. Tell me, rate my job, if you will. How do you think I did summarizing this band in about 60 seconds?
Hey, if rules aren't being made to be broken, like, what's rock and roll, right? Like,
it's true.
Rock and roll never follow the rules. There's a bunch of overtime games out there too, nobody plays within the 60 seconds.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's plenty of overtime out there. I commend you for the inclusion of the production on Blue Album. Also, we can talk about the difference between the production of Blue Album and Pinkerton, because I think that plays a lot into the sound of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Naming off all the band members' name, I think that's a big plus too. Like, everyone focuses on Rivers, but I think especially Matt Sharp and Brian Bell had a really impact on how this album sounded as well. And then the Madame Butterfly references too. Like, kudos. I think I might give you 3,000 points.
3,000. Thank you for that. Ooh, those feel so substantial. Yeah. Those feel like hefty points.
They are. They're heavy points. They're real points.
Okay, so before we talk more about the band and the album, though, we want to talk to you. We want to find out a little bit more about what your story is as it relates to music. So this is the opportunity for you to characterize what your relationship with music is in your life, writ large.
I mean, that's such a rich question, because I feel like music has played a part of almost like every relationship I've had, either it be family, significant other, friendship, coworker, even. Yeah, I started out playing music at a young age. I learned how to play guitar at 13. Yeah, I was lucky enough that the middle school I was in had like guitar program. Funny thing is that my guitar teacher was actually a violinist and was learning to play the guitar as she was teaching us how to play the guitar. So it was an interesting intro in that she taught us a lot of theory actually to begin with, which came in handy. Came in handy when it came to writing music. Yeah, I had a better understanding of how to put things together. Music always made sense to me in my brain too. I'm a little neurodivergent. Like the mathematical part of music always made sense to me. You know, I had these notes, I had rhythms, fractions. It all made sense to me in that sense. So played in a few local bands out in Miami. Came out to Seattle, recorded a solo album by myself, which was interesting.
That's huge. You made an album.
It is at 19 years old. Yeah, I think back about it, I'm like, wow, I was really young.
I could barely do laundry when I was 19 years old.
I can barely do laundry now.
But I'm ching.
So, yeah, and I have a big connection to this album specifically because of that. Because while I was writing that album, I had a really bad leg injury.
No kidding, huh?
Yeah, I was out for 5 months. The feeling that you have at a young age with being like so limited in your body. I mean, I've always experienced that. I was born with scoliosis. So I always had issues with my back growing up as a kid. So really having that experience of that limitation of your body at a young age, it really gives you a different perspective. It gives you a better appreciation of your body. So yeah, that kind of drove a little bit of my inspiration. Came up with that. I was in another local band in Seattle. Did some kind of, live playing here and there. And then that kind of dwindled off, didn't work out. And then I had this like kind of midlife crisis at 25 years old. I I had identified so much of my own identity to music, not only like to the music that I was creating, but the music I was listening to, that I felt like at one point that was sort of kind of taken away from me inadvertently. And so I had to kind of re-identify myself, revalue what I wanted in life. And then I moved to the Bay Area. I've been out here now for 13 years, and sort of found that identity without the tethering of it. I'm a bit of a yogi now, so it's a big part of the yogic practice is practicing attachment. And so we can find a lot of comfort in things, but we have to be able to know that those things are imperative and they will go away at some point. And so we have to find our way to detach ourselves from those things to be able to find a little bit of peace.
I'll give you 900,000 points for detachment leading to peace. That's something to hang your hat on, isn't it?
It's an ongoing process.
So I'm curious. You should settle something. Not this was ever a debate, but with you being a legacy guest and everything, how much of your musical interests or musical tastes came from your sister, or was there just sort of like an exchange back and forth?
Well, the age difference between my sister and I think has a little bit to do with that too. She's like 6.5 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's significant.
It is. And in a lot of ways, I mean, she was a caretaker of mine for a big chunk. And I think with the music, it definitely played more of an influential role on me as as she would go, especially when she went off to college. There was a big kind of like musical education that she kind of went through with that exposure. And so when she would come back for visits and stuff like that, picking her brain when it came to music was a big part of our relationship. I would love to remember like the first person I turned her on to, like the first musical artist I turned her on to.
Yeah.
But I can't remember.
That has to be a good feeling. My sister's turned me on to lots of music. Now she's younger than I am, though only by a year, and I love when that happens because I'm like, oh shit. Not that I ever was any kind of authority, but I was like, the student has become the master now.
I mean, yeah, there's been a few things that I've turned her on to. I think about certain music, certain artists, and they'll define like a certain era of my life. So, and it's not necessarily like, oh, that was coming out at the time. Like I got into Sly and the Family Stone oddly in the mid-aughts somewhere, and like was jamming to Life during one of my like Chicago trips. So for me, that's my kind of connection to that. Like I got into like 90s hip hop in Seattle.
Okay.
Like mid 2000s reggae, like all the reggae music that I listen to, that really makes me feel like San Francisco in like 2015, 2014, something like that.
I can see it now.
Right? It's a feel, it's a vibe. It's a vibe.
So will you listen to just pretty much, or have you listened to pretty much anything and everything?
I have been called a music slut in my past.
Have you? Hey, no shame here. This is a pro slut zone. That's what this is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll give you a million points for being a music slut. How about that?
Yeah. No slut shaming here.
Never.
I embrace it because my love spreads a little further. Maybe people think of it as spreading a little thinner. It doesn't mean that, sluts love any less intensely.
He's got a lot of love to give.
Yeah. When a slut loves, it loves intensely. So
it is like a perspective on the world, right? Like you talk about the yogic mindset with which you like think about detachment, and I can see, honestly, I can see the connection there. The idea of leaving yourself open to be affected by any type of music, regardless of genre or public perception of that, I think is a really valuable and commendable point of view on music. One that I hope to embody as well.
I hope everyone can embrace that, because in my earlier years, like I'll admit I was a bit of a hipster. If it didn't fit a certain, if Enemy hadn't written about it, then I wasn't going to listen to it. Pretty much.
Gotcha.
So
been there.
But that whole time I was secretly watching TRL too, and VH1 Soul and 120 minutes. Like
that stuff was great.
It was wonderful, because all you have to do was like just put the channel on, and in whatever hour it was, like you were getting exposure to that little bit.
6,000 points for VH1's programming in the aughts was just in general amazing.
That was my pop culture education, honestly. VH1 in the early 2000s, when it came to like music documentaries, when it came to like the I Love the 80s series that came out, the I Love the 70s series that came out.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a big education for me.
I think they were really valuable. Absolutely.
Totally.
Well, you're talking about discovery. So could you tell us a bit about, do you remember exactly how and when you discovered Weezer's Pinkerton? I mean, I guess maybe you could talk about like how you discovered Weezer, but then like how this album came into your life, especially.
Yeah. So my sister had mentioned Columbia House, right? That was kind of her.
Oh yeah, we've covered BMG and Columbia House several times on this podcast. Right, we're quite familiar.
A frequent guest, if you will.
And I do want to turn my camera back on for this, because
do it. You have something to show us.
Yeah, because these are for the real Columbia House heads. Now, I don't even remember these stickers that they would give us. Columbia House would give us the stickers of the albums. Stickers? Yeah, so they were like little stamps.
Oh, there's Almost Famous.
Really?
Yeah, and there's the blue. There's the blue album. And there's
a blue album.
Is that the green album
there's
too?
A Pinkerton. Yeah, the Pinkerton and the green album's there.
Wow.
This was like my guitar growing up.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Oh wow.
Look at that.
The A little cool rock star for
Oh,
you.
I don't think I didn't see that, Aldo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, you get 5 million points for having the Columbia House guitar.
Ooh, 5 million.
Wait,
But yeah, so they would.
Michael, are you familiar with these stickers? I've never heard of these stickers.
This must have been just a Columbia House, not a BMG thing, because I didn't get any stickers. I just got albums, which I would also like to point out that if you ever tried to like resell a BMG or Columbia House CD, like sell it back to like a store or like a used CD store,
Yeah.
sometimes they wouldn't accept it because on the back there would be a marking that made it clear that it came from BMG or Columbia House. So like there was not as much resale value on a BMG. Not that you'd want to like get rid of any good CDs, but you know sometimes BMG and Columbia House would deliver you some clunkers. I'm thinking specifically, I think I had an album by the Nixons, if you even remember who they were.
No.
No.
Not even a little bit.
They had a song called Sister that was really popular in the 90s. Sister, I see you. Something along those lines.
It sounds like a daughter dupe. That's what it sounds like.
I mean, it wasn't everyone was trying to be any better in the 90s. But anyway, back to you, Aldo.
Yeah,
talking
go.
about discovering
back to you.
album.
Sorry, we went off there. We went off on our own.
Went off on the tangent. Hey, yeah, I'm with it. I was there with you. So with the Columbia House, there's like a stack of cassettes that I can truly imagine. And like Nevermind is on there, Dookie is on there,
of course,
and the Blue Album is on there. Oh, and 10 too, Pearl Jam's 10. Those were kind of the staples that I would always like define my like cassette stack. But Pinkerton came later. Like I was not really on the radar at all when it came out. I think my sister was already in college by then, or maybe she went like a year after. And it was one of her trips, and she came back. She had made a mixtape. On the mixtape was a lot of influential things that started obsessing over, like Magnetic Fields,
cool.
Elliott Smith. But these 2 Weezer songs were on there, and I was like, man, these sound so different, so weird. And it was The Good Life and Pink Triangle. She had put on these on this mix. So I think I bought the album after, maybe like a year or two after, and just could not stop listening to it. For me, it was sonically caught my attention. The sound of it sounded more raw than the Blue Album. The Blue Album sounded very like produced and just radio friendly.
Yeah.
And Pinkerton just had a little bit of a rawness to it. One of my bandmates, actually, him and his cousin were really big fans, and so we just started like nerding out on Weezer, and then just listening to the story after that, and then it was just like, whoa, crazy. And then I started reading the Rolling Stone reviews, like, and was like, man, people really hated this album.
Yeah.
Like hated. So I guess like Rolling Stone had it as like the 3rd worst album of that year that it came out.
Was there any part of you that looked at that criticism and was like, yeah, I can't kind of see this, why this might be less, or like, I kind of see what they might consider bad about this?
Honestly, no.
That's great. I love that.
but it's also like, it was one of those defining moments as like a teenager too, because at least I would rely on reviews a lot to give an album a chance. Because at that time you would have to buy the album to listen to it. So like to really like put some money into it, I really wanted to see what I get myself into.
Yeah.
So for a while, yeah, critics were kind of like it. They were the ones that they were say yay or nay, and I had listened to the album before I had read the review. Maybe that would have changed if I had read the review before I had listened to the album. But I was kind of like, what are they talking about? This is great.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, like re-listening to this and remembering. I mean, now of course we listen, in retrospect, like with many great albums, reviewers are like, oh, never mind, we had it wrong. Like it actually was pretty decent. And like re-listening to this, I was trying to think of what distinguished it from the Blue Album. I think what you said about it being raw definitely makes sense. I mean, for me, when I was listening to it, it has a little bit of, it feels like leaning a little bit more towards like hard rock, or like there's more distortion on the guitars, and in some ways too, like even like lyrically. And we'll get to the concept in a bit, because I have some questions about that.
Mm.
But but it also, I mean, in some ways it seems kind of like this is Weezer's emo metal album in some ways. Like, I don't think it's either of those genres, but like when you put the word Weezer in between emo and metal, like that, I don't know. How does that make sense to you, or am I talking out of my ass over here?
No, I totally agree. I think the music industry would agree with you too, because I think a lot of those kind of like emo pop punk, emo metal bands that came out in the mid to early aughts gave a lot of credit to Pinkerton
Yeah.
as an influence for them. I think a lot of the criticism that they got for the writing specifically, I think a lot of people said that it sounded too basic, or the lyrics were like just a little too just like there, just like plain. It was more just like a raw expression of emotion. And sometimes that is just simply put. And that translates to a lot of that music that came out after. Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the sound too. You do start to hear that hard rock, that like the key changes when they go into their guitar solos too. Like that's a very like stadium rock type of thing.
Yeah.
That they weren't exploring as much in the Blue Album.
We use the word raw. I love to dig into more to those words, because a lot of times when people talk about these very vulnerable confessional albums, they use the word raw. And is it like a danger element that gives you that sense of rawness, or is it a sort of like discomfort in some way? How would you characterize that?
I mean, there is a danger in being vulnerable for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
And Rivers experienced that danger firsthand, because I mean he did express himself in this album and it got rejected, and in turn closed himself off to the rest of the world for the next 5 years. So there is a danger to being vulnerable. I think abrasive too. I think those are really only attached to vulnerability because we're still uncomfortable with it,
Sure.
at least with expressing it in public and expressing it with other people, that we find those moments of expression or vulnerability to be abrasive or raw, or they could come out a little aggressive too. We're living in these bubbles, these meat suits, and we have all these sensations that will just want to like come out of us, and we also live in a society where it tells us not to,
Sure.
or to do so, but it has to be in a very specific way. Yeah, I think abrasive is a good word. I don't know if aggression would be my best descriptive word there.
In some ways, like they always strike me as like nerds with an edge, and like nerds who rock. And I think, like speaking as a nerd, like like we all have a little bit of pent up aggression in us. And it, like, I mean, I was rewatching some of the videos, well, the main one from this album for El Scorcho, and just watching the way they act in that video, and it just feels like there is sort of they're getting something out through the music, but also having fun with it at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know. I rewatched some interviews with Rivers as well. He can be very reclusive. His body language is, very kind of shoulders rolled in. He doesn't make a lot of eye contact with the interviewer. But the things that he says, it's almost like uncomfortably honest. One of the interviewers was talking to him about Tired of Sex. And, that's a very interesting song, because in a way, like, not a lot of rock stars explore their sexuality in a introspective, like, what am I doing? I'm searching for love, and all I'm doing is like having the superficial relationships with all these like girls, and being a rock star. The way he would respond to these questions is just like, whoa, I wasn't expecting you to say all that. Like, I've always gone towards music first. Like, I always hear music as a musician. I've always focused on the music. Even in my writing, I remember some songs I would not finish lyrics until either the day of the show that we were debuting the song or like right before the recording process of the
Still
song.
on time. Right on time.
No, it was still right on time, right on time. So for me, the lyrical journey took a while for me to get there, and then once I got there, yeah, it really kind of opened my eyes on the whole thing.
Okay, I think the time is ripe, my friends, to let the listeners hear a little bit of this album. Aldo, we asked you to pick a standout track from the album. Will you tell our listeners what you chose?
My standout track for Pinkerton is The Good Life.
The Good Life. All right. Everybody, if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, you're going to hear the whole song. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you'll hear a wee snippet. In either scenario, we'll be right back with you.